Hey guys, I am the 50s Kid. Behind me is an E53. It's a 2001 X5, and if you saw my previous video about changing the power steering pump on this vehicle, you'll know a little bit of the backstory of what happened to it. Basically, just to recap, it got in an accident, the cooling fan exploded, and it took out the radiator, took out the power steering pump reservoir, and some of those plastic fragments from the fan ended up in the power steering system, in the power steering lines, and those fragments caused the power steering pump to get chewed up, and so now the power steering is actually gone, and it's kind of manual steering. I replaced the power steering pump, hoping that would fix it, and it worked for the first test drive, but then it went back to not working. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and change the steering rack, and I'm going to remove all the lines from the car, clean them out with compressed air, and also change the pump again. I've got a new to me used power steering rack and a power steering pump. So I'm going to go ahead and change those parts out on the car and hopefully put this problem to rest for good. Anyway, let's get started. So we need to remove the skid plate underneath the vehicle. To do that, there are 6 16mm bolts, and you need to hold the nuts on the top of them with a wrench and slip it up over. Repeat the same thing on the other side. And I've also removed the front wheels, as you can see. Oops, action scene. Okay, I've got the driver's side wheel turned all the way out so that I have more access to the tie rod in here. And this is actually a 22mm nut, so remove that. And this time, I'm gonna wear some ear protection because I've learned that whacking this thing with a hammer in my garage is quite reverberating. Anyway, taking the biggest hammer I have, I'm gonna whack the thing that the tie rod goes through to shock it loose. Just like that. Yeah. I'm gonna drain the power steering system. To do that, I'm gonna loosen this bolt. This is the inline coming down from the power steering reservoir. It's a 24. Looks like I put it on there really tight last time. I've got a drain pan position below here, by the way. Let's just get this loose and let it drain. I'm going to let it drain, and then I'm going to start the car and turn the steering wheel from lock to lock just to force all the fluid out of the rack, as much fluid out as I possibly can, because I don't want any dripping out when we take everything apart. Looks like the fluid turned a little brighter pink there. That's because there's cavitation in it. There's a lot of bubbles in there. I'm gonna let it drain, then probably do that again. I've gone ahead and removed that bolt all the way. I think the fact that it was still on there was creating like a little vacuum, and it was continuing to draw the fluid through the system. So now that I've completely removed the bolt and the outlet is just hanging, or the inlet I should say is just hanging, we should get all the rest of the fluid out of the system. There we go. Well, hopefully that'll do it once that stopped draining. So as you can see, looking in from the wheel well here, this is the steering rack, okay? And it's bolted to the lower subframe of the vehicle. And the engine is actually sitting on top of that right there. And it's, here's one of the engine mounts right back here. That's the engine mount. Now, in order to get enough room for the steering rack to come out, you can see that it's actually going up this way. This is where the steering wheel input is, and it's going up too high in order to come out. You know, it's not going to fit through this space. So what we need to do is drop the lower subframe of the vehicle, drop it down. The problem is the engine's going to come down with it, so we have to figure out a way to hold the engine up in place while we drop the subframe. And this is what you need to do that. This is an engine support bar, and I got this one at Harbor Freight. It was about 63 bucks after the 20% off coupon. You can see that the feet are sitting right here where the strut tower is, because this is the reinforced steel. This needs to hold the weight of the vehicle right here. So this is reinforced, and so that's where I've got the feet sitting. You can see it's sitting here on the other side. I just had to pull this wiring loom back from the side a little bit to get it to fit in place. The same thing on the other side. Real easy. I've got the engine cover removed, and I've got the chains slipped in through the engine hanging points. There's one on the front here and one on the back here where you can't really see it. But that's where it is. And I've got that hooked up, and I've got tension taken up right now. So there's actually tension on the engine. It's pulling up just a tad. And now I'm going to proceed to get the engine mounts disconnected, get the steering disconnected from the steering rack, and then drop the subframe. Down through here, blocked by all these things, is going to be the engine mount. And if I can just kind of disconnect these coolant hoses, disconnect the coolant heater hose. It's the heater valve, actually. From it. Get this whole valve off and up to the side. And there we go. We've exposed the nut from above, and what I'm going to do is use some really long extensions with a swivel socket to just get down on it. It's a 16. On the passenger side, the engine mount is actually a little bit more towards the front. So this is right where this is the air cleaner box right here. And it's just right over top of it. As you can see, it's right down there. And I should be able to slip that same socket and extensions down onto it. There's actually less room, even though it's easier to see, and I've got it. And I am losing torque. That's what long extensions will do. We'll just decrease the torque that you have by the time it gets all the way down there. So I'm going to use a breaker bar, apply my own torque, just like so. I think what it is the weight of the engine. Actually, I might have a little too much tension on the engine from above on my engine support here, because it feels very difficult to remove this bolt still. Give it a couple spins, make sure it's free, and it is. So get the tool out of there. Okay, looking down from the driver's side here, what we need to do is disconnect the steering column from the steering rack. And to do that, you got to get that bolt loose. No, not that one. That one. That's the pinch bolt for the steering column where it connects to the steering rack. Got to get that free. Now, I remember this being very difficult in the junkyard. I don't think I even had the correct E12 socket at the time, and I don't even remember how I got it off. Maybe I actually did have it. But I remember it being very, very difficult because it's really hard to get down in there with a tool. Just to give you a wider view here. The camera's probably going to be in the way the entire time, or my hand's going to be in the way the entire time. I've got to slip my long-handled flex head socket down onto the bolt. I'm really not going to be able to see anything. So, well, finally got that bolt out of there. Wish BMW would make that easier. Now we're going to loosen the steering rack from the lower subframe. It's an E14, and you kind of just go up through here. 2 E14 bolts. There are also nuts holding it on. They're 18mm nuts, and you just kind of grab onto them in the back like that. Ooh, and they are on there. Yay. And for the other side. Hey. Why, oh why, does BMW love e-torque sockets so much? They really suck. So, as you can see, I've got a piece of wood supporting the lower subframe. Got my jack underneath that. This is so that the subframe doesn't come crashing down on the ground. Remember, it's still attached, the suspension's still attached to it, so it's very heavy. It's still got the steering rack that's going to come down with it. Very heavy. Got to support it. And there are 3 bolts on each side. There's one here, and then there's one back up in here, and then one all the way in the back. I'll probably move the camera angle as I get those two. But for now, I'm going to use my impact to get these ones out. It's actually a really long extension that I have. And this is an E18 socket. To get out that really big bolt. I think I'll get these other ones out too. So that middle one is inside that hole right there. So just to prevent this thing from crashing on my head, I've screwed those front 2 back in a couple of turns. That'll just prevent it from crashing down. Let me get the back one here. Gonna let the subframe down a little. Looks like there's a fastener right here that's holding the lower subframe onto this part of the subframe. It's actually just looks like some plastic cowling, but I need to go around and make sure that there are no other fasteners holding it in. So just double check some things here. I think it's just an 8mm fastener. Holding it onto some air ducting there. I don't think that really mattered at all. I think that the front subframe is actually getting held up on this here, another part of the front subframe. So I think as we lower it, we're probably going to need to tip it down and push it backwards. Let's try lowering it again. Yeah, it's definitely hung up on that. So we've got to disconnect those 2 fluid lines from the steering rack. That top one is a 19. Bottom one's a 22. I already cracked it earlier. Yay. Okay guys, as you can see, I've got the frame lowered quite a bit more now. I just kind of did that slowly and gingerly, and I think the reason this frame doesn't want to drop completely down is because these lower suspension members here and then this one here are so tight in their brackets right here that they're just kind of holding the lower frame up. So if I were to just loosen these screws on all 4 of these screws on this side and that side, I think that the thing would just drop rapidly. So I think I'm just going to leave it like this for now because I kind of like the fact that it's holding itself up into place. I was struggling just a bit earlier. I didn't get this on camera, but right here, this is where that's where the steering wheel, the steering linkage connects to the steering rack. And that did not want to come off right there. You can see it's kind of rusted and such. It was really just rusted into place and didn't want to come off. But I was able to get my pry bar under there, and I just kind of pried at it and just gave it a couple of whacks, and then it just popped up and off. So now I'm ready to pull the steering rack out. So as you can see, the lower subframe is low enough in the front here that I can actually clear the steering rack past the body of the car at this point. So I'll be able to pull it out this way, but I'm not gonna be able to do that with the camera in my hand. So yeah, just enough to clear it, hopefully. Yeah, let's stick it. And we're leaking fluid everywhere. That should be expected. Okay. So this is the new to me used pump, and you can see it's quite dirty. So I'm gonna go clean it with my pressure washer. This kind of gives you an idea of what the steering rack looked like, because they both came from the same vehicle. Well, there we go. That thing does pretty good, doesn't it? And as we can see, this is an LF68 at 120 bar. I'm going to attempt to reuse the clamps for these boots by not actually taking these clamps off completely. I'm just going to get my screwdriver in here and try to open it up a little. Kind of like this. See, so now it's sort of loose like that. And I'm thinking, my thinking is that I can just clamp it back down once I get it on to the new rack. But yeah, I can just kind of remove it like that. And I'll peel the boot back and come in with a big adjustable wrench like this to get this loose. And you know, it's occurring to me now that I probably should have done this when the rack was still on the car so that I would have the best leverage. But oh well. All right, so I've got it clamped in my what passes for a bench vise. It's my woodworking bench vise. And hopefully this will hold it well enough that I can get this loose. Hey, that worked. That's all I really care about. Cool. So I'll attach this tie rod to the new rack, and same for the other side. Okay, now this is really important. I want to make sure that my new rack is adjusted to the same steering wheel center point that my old rack was, because I don't want to have to change the steering angle sensor or recalibrate it. So I'm just going to compare like that, and it looks like they're adjusted about the same. If this was sticking out a little bit more, then it would be off and I would just set it correctly.